Hi, my name's Shannon. I'm working on the National Feral Deer Action Plan, and I'm here to talk about the exponential growth and spread of deer and the threat that they pose to our country. This is an invasion curve. It depicts the exponential growth and spread of invasive species through time. When rabbits were first introduced to Australia, we saw them go through this invasion curve. At the start, it was quite rare and a treat to see rabbits in the wild, and their impacts to agriculture, to societies, and to environment were not yet obvious. But as their numbers grew and as they spread, they took over Australia and their impacts became devastating. Deer are said to be the next rabbit, and they too are moving along this invasion curve. We know that deer numbers are increasing. They were introduced to Australia in the 1800s by acclimatisation societies for hunting and for farming. In the 1980s, it was estimated there was around 50,000 deer in Australia. In 2002, that number rose to 200,000. And in 2021, we estimate there's 1 to 2 million deer in Australia. Some estimates say there's 1 million deer in Victoria alone. This is an exponential rise in numbers. And when we map that on the invasion curve, it's clear that that growth is on the upward trend. Of the estimated 1 million deer in Victoria last year, 125,000 deer were controlled. This is a great effort, but it's not nearly enough. To stop or halt that spread, that exponential rise of deer, we need to control 35 to 50% of the population every single year. Taking the lower estimate, that means 350,000 deer of the 1 million had to be controlled, double the control that we did. With the current efforts, we're only going to see that increase in rise. And as deer numbers increase, they spread. This is a map showing the sightings of deer within Victoria. Watch as those dots spread throughout the state. As deer populations increase, as we get bushfires and translocations, they rapidly spread across the country. In the last 20 years, they have more than doubled their range, and today they occupy more than a quarter of New South Wales and of Tasmania, and more than a third of Victoria. And they're spreading from every part of that range with no apparent decline. On the left is a map showing the current distribution of deer throughout Australia, and on the right shows a suitable habitat and climate for deer, with the dark red being most suitable and the green being least suitable. We can see that deer do not yet occupy all potential habitat and have potential to occupy more than 50% of Australia, a testimony to their inherent adaptability. As deer numbers increase and spread throughout Australia, so do their impacts. First, deer impact our environment. Globally, deer are described as ecosystem engineers or as keystone species because of their capacity to completely alter an ecosystem in sometimes irreversible ways. This largely comes down to the fact that they are very large, very greedy herbivores. A 2004 study in Australia estimated that a single deer consumes 18,800 litres of plant material per year. This significantly raises the browsing pressure on our vegetation above that of native herbivores. For example, a deer consumes 4 times that of a swamp wallaby. The impact is reduced regeneration and reduced density and diversity of our vegetation. In areas with high densities of deer, there's 30 to 70% less understory than in areas with low density, and inside exclusion fences that have excluded deer, there's 80% more native trees. This picture on the left here was taken in 2019 in Illawarra, New South Wales, just after a deer exclusion fence was put up to protect the critically endangered littoral rainforest behind. This picture was taken 3 years later. The increase in density and diversity when deer are excluded from the region is obvious. And as we know, any impact to vegetation has flow-on effects to fauna, including those listed under the Environmental Protection Biodiversity Act. For example, the critically endangered helmeted honeyeater is impacted by deer who destroy their habitat. Community groups attempting to protect this critically endangered bird are having to surround regenerating habitat with deer exclusion fences so it has a chance to grow and give a space for this bird. In addition to impact to the environment, deer impact agriculture. I said that deer are very large and very greedy animals, and they are. A single deer will consume 1.8 to 3.6 times that of sheep. That's your dry sheep equivalent. This means that farmers aren't only stocking cattle or sheep, but are stocking deer, causing them to have to destock or even supplement feed. The impact is obvious to farmers attempting regenerative agricultural practices, such as rotational grazing, where the paddocks that are meant to be resting are not able to be rested because deer simply jump the fence and continue to browse. Deer also damage infrastructure. They go through fences, over fences, under fences. I've heard reports of farmers having to repair fences every 3 months compared to every 3 years. The economic and labour burden becomes significant. At a national level, we're very concerned about the biosecurity of feral deer. Deer readily jump across fences and can readily transfer diseases from farm to farm to farm in a way that would be very challenging to control. The disease we're particularly concerned about is a foot and mouth disease outbreak. In other countries, deer spread foot and mouth, and if it was to come to Australia, a small outbreak controlled in 3 months would cost us $7.1 billion to control. Last, deer impact our societies. They impact everybody. As the deer numbers increase, the risk from poaching and illegal hunting increases as well. I've seen a lot of fear living within communities because of this risk. In addition to the fear from illegal hunting, there's a very real threat from motor vehicle accidents. Deer can be very large animals, up to 200 kilograms. Hitting an animal that large at speed can have serious consequences. In Victoria, deer are the 4th most hit animal. And that number is only increasing as we start to see them encroach on peri-urban areas, and we see them on Melbourne highways and in suburbia. And as deer start to live closer and closer to humans, they have the potential to pass on diseases by acting as a reservoir. In America, white-tailed deer have been shown to carry COVID-19 that they contracted from humans. No research has been done in Australia, but it's a testimony to show the capacity for deer to act as a reservoir for zoonotic diseases. So deer are impacting our environments, our agriculture, and threatening our societies. They're moving along this invasion curve at an exponential rate, and the intensity and spread of those impacts are increasing. If we're not careful, the situation will look just like the rabbits, but worse. In order to reach the necessary 34 to 50% knockdown required to just halt the spread of deer, we all need to work together, whether you're a federal MP, local council, or on the ground. This requires a top-down and bottom-up approach. We've seen that deer impact everybody: farmers, lovers of the environment, people living in suburbia. To control this problem, we need to act now, and we need to act together.